I want to talk about people railing against education. I think that this is a really popular thing in popular culture, and it's probably been like this for a very long time. There was a moment in time where between probably about the 1930s to I would say the 1980s, that there was a clear link that people understood and that education was honored, right? Like it was kind of like institutionalized, it was ritualized. There was a lot of people understood the relationship between if you get more education, the better off you actually are, right? Like this was a really big thing, right? So in my parents' days, um, people did not get that long of an education. They probably stopped in high school. It's really, really common if you talk to my parents or my mom. My dad passed away, but both my mom and my dad, they did not finish high school, and that was super common in their day. But there was a relationship between getting more education and sort of financially being better. It was just kind of a hard thing to do. They could sort of so my dad dropped out and worked in the pulp and paper mill. Um, and then the years before that, people would finish. My great grandparents, I don't think they even got, I think they got elementary school at best education, but there is a real strong link between getting more education, the better off you are. But most people did not get a lot of education. And uh, in the 1980s, there was a stronger push to educate more people for a longer time, right? Like stay in school, don't be a fool, all of those things, right? Just to get people to get a high school education. And in the last 10 years or 20 years, there has been just a, a gauntlet of people going to university and college. This is kind of like the millennial, late millennial Gen Z era, because people see the link between education and doing well. But the problem is the more people get education, it's an institutionalized thing, right? Like the more education you get doesn't necessarily translate into, better salaries instantly, particularly when it's when it's institutionalized and people are choosing educational degrees that kind of don't make sense. There's a lot that you're like, um, but you can find a relationship between them. But there's a lot that financially just don't sort of translate into doing well. And so there's definitely a discontent right now of people getting education. It was always there, right? You remember my parents, they did not finish high school. There was a real strong backlash in my family about getting education, like super strong. This is how I rebelled as I became a professor. Is literally it, right? Like that's the reason that I became a professor. I was like saying screw you to my parents, a sort of teenage rebellion thing. It just took 20 years to get there. Um, but you know, all of that, there's some really strong undertones with all of these things against education. But if you look at, and then the other sort of underlying sort of feature that's in society is we see these people that have not gotten an education. There's a few celebrities have not gotten an education, and we see the link, particularly in sort of the quote unquote success realm, right? Whatever that looks like, the business area, where you see, it's these high school dropouts or, college dropouts more or less. People don't talk about high school dropouts anymore with that kind of sort of success, but there are lots of people that do that. But here's the thing, right? You're playing with numbers. What you're seeing with all of these circumstances where you think that, if you drop out, you become successful. If you stay with education, you'll become successful. What it is a numbers game in terms of what's going on, right? On either side, there are plenty of examples where people have not gotten an education and become very successful. There is a ton of bricklayers and a ton of people that build houses, do construction, those kind of things that are enormously successful. Um, my brother is just enormously successful in what he actually does, and he builds houses out in Alberta, and he does extremely well. He does far better than I do, and yet he didn't get a university education, and didn't become a professor, right? Like those things are there, right? And that there's plenty, many, many, many examples of this happening. And then on the opposite side, right, there's many people that have gone and gotten plenty of education, done really, really well with their educational efforts, gotten master's degrees and PhDs, and they get it in areas that just don't have any relationship with the market, right? And even people, so in my field, I feel like this all the time, right? Like in my field, um, in business, I'm in strategy. I did finance, like really, really um, the highest value area of business, right? I was purposely doing that because I was worried about the sort of financial impact of this. And so I did, finance. I did many courses in finance. I did a PhD in strategy, many courses and things that just were, I wanted to become, a stellar manager. And so I did, I minored in sociology as well as doing engineering in my undergrad. And then I went I, studied a bunch of finance and management science, like super, super lucrative areas. And I don't know why the hell I'm still in academia, but whatever. Like super lucrative areas, uh, massive financial return on those things. And yet, like those things still, I'm not paid what I should be, right? In academia, I should be paid a heck of a lot more, right? Like that. And everybody will tell you that in academic are generally underpaid compared to what I would get in industry, right? So all of these things, right? What I'm saying is it's a numbers game. What we're looking at in those particular situations are kind of outlying situations, right? If you look on average, so on average would be if you just get a collection of people, right, and you collect those people. Say you get 10,000 people, right, and then you just simply plot education, number of years of education versus their income, and what you'll see is a pretty strong relationship where a little bit more education, another year of education, almost uniformly always equals to more income, right? It is one of the most strong relationships that we know of, right? In the sort of research game, you look at it as really strong relationship. But here's the thing: it doesn't equate always. And what we're looking at is on average across many, many people. This is why it's good for governments to sort of push for this, um, is that skill development and building your work capacity and all those kind of things actually does pan out, right? Like you could see opportunities and all those kind of things. But here's the thing: is on on an individual basis, right? For you, that might not work out, and it might not equate. And if you start breaking it down into different exceptions, you start looking at all the ways that you could take in education and all the different things. You break it down and it becomes a much more nuanced thing, and it becomes much more specific to the individual and what actually happens. One of the tricky things with education is it's hard to measure and disentangle somebody's competence. Really hard. In fact, it created somebody's competence from education, that the potential that they got from education. So competent people get education, and then the other thing is that there's many competent people that don't get an education and do well, right? And so there's a whole field of people using what's called instrumental variables, and it's basically built on the technique of thinking of, how do we disentangle this effect, right? And um, you know, this whole thing is a complicated, difficult thing to disentangle. And I don't know what the answer is. I still don't, I don't quite know if there is a difference there. But generally, when you try to measure those things and you try to, remove the effect of competence and stuff, as far as I know, education still matters. It gives you a boost, right? It's just that it's complementary in terms of if you have competence and you're going to do well. And so, what I want to say is that even though there are plenty of people that do extremely well without education, there's plenty of people that don't do well if they get a lot of education compared to what they should. There's plenty of people. Um, there is a relationship on average, in aggregate, across many, many hundreds of thousands of people, or even just tens of thousands, or even just thousands of people. There is typically a relationship between your education and how much you actually make. And I just want you to sort of realize that and think about that is that, yeah, there is a relationship, but there's all these nuances in terms of, who you are and all these kind of things. So it doesn't pan out always in terms of thinking of, is this going to be a rewarding situation? But in general, there is a relationship there. And, it's good to actually get an education. It is good. Um, what you choose has a lot of things going on behind it, but at the same time, if you get an education, generally there's positive effects from it, and there's negative effects, but generally there are positive effects from it. I just want you to know and understand that and how this actually works. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.